Everyone. Over the past 18 months I've been working on my project about Kawakawa, and so the end kind of project that we've resulted in has been examining the anti-inflammatory properties of Kawakawa extracts that we've made. And this is just a brief seminar, of half an hour hopefully brief, of what we've looked at, kind of the journey that we've been on and the results that we've come to, and why those actually matter for just normal everyday people who are here today. So the idea for this project came to me on a family holiday in the South Island in 2011. I think it's always good to think about where we've come from as we come to the end of any journey. And we were on a bus tour of Farewell Spit, and as we drove past a grove of Kawakawa, the bus driver said to us, "Look, there's some Kawakawa. Maori think it's really significant in their traditional forms of medicine, but there's no scientific evidence to support this." Now, to be honest, I just didn't outright believe him. I thought, well, if something's really significant to Maori, then of course someone must have done some research on it at some stage, and as we'll touch on later, this of course wasn't the case. So Kawakawa, for those of you who don't know it, has a scientific name of Macropiper excelsum and is a New Zealand native plant. It's found in coastal regions of New Zealand all the way far south as Banks Peninsula and the Chatham Islands, so it's well suited to a vast range of environments, and so it would have been vastly accessible to the early Maori who settled here in New Zealand. It grows a bush or a small tree and grows up to 6 metres of height. I'm sure some of you have seen it in your own gardens. And the leaves are heart-shaped and characteristically often nibbled with many little holes, which are caused by the larvae of the native moth, Cleora scripta. Now, it's the only insect which eats Kawakawa, as all the other insects find the leaves poisonous. Now, this is actually really interesting to think about, because if we consider that bioactive compounds are generally secondary metabolites, so compounds that aren't actually essential to the functioning of the plant, often produced as insect defense, then this actually brings up an interesting question that perhaps these compounds are what's responsible for the activity that Maori saw in Kawakawa. But more on that later. So I suppose once I'd come up with this idea of what I wanted to do and how I thought Kawakawa would be something really interesting to research, a long journey of seeking support began. Clearly, the kind of things that I wanted to do were far beyond the equipment, the knowledge, the understanding base that I had access to. So I contacted a number of organisations, and Jackie Bay and John Taylor were very grateful for that. They came forward and were willing to help me and actually guide me through the process and actually help me realise my dream. And of course, Ngā Pauta Maramatanga, representatives of whom can't be here tonight, funded this research, but also provided invaluable assistance on actually the significance of Kawakawa in Maori medicine. So the previous studies on Kawakawa. My research when I came back from Auckland after our holiday and tried to actually find out what was known scientifically, showed that there were only 2 previous studies of Kawakawa, and neither studied Kawakawa in any great individual depth, and neither identified any significant antibacterial or antiviral activity. So as a result, there is very little scientific evidence to support the claims that are made in Ronga. So these 2 studies were from 1986 and 1990, and screened a vast number of plants, one of which in each happened to be Kawakawa. Now, they used methanolic extract, which, as we'll show later, is actually rather significant in understanding perhaps why these studies didn't show any activity. Also importantly, there were limitations associated with these studies. So neither used an extraction method which replicated traditional Maori methods, as both used organic solvent, and nor does either study specify the concentration at which Kawakawa was applied to cells or cell culture to bacteria, something that was shown to be significant in this study. And there is question over the extraction methods used, so they used organic solvents, and both used heat in their extraction. So the Soxolite extraction method which was used might have damaged bioactive compounds, because a large number of bioactive compounds are proteins which can be damaged under heat as they lose their shape and might no longer behave in the way that they used to. So this topic was of interest to me as members of my family are Maori, and I thought that it would be an exciting opportunity to actually be able to fuse Maori knowledge with science to actually perhaps come up with some new understanding, but especially considering how little research has gone into Maori medicine. An important part of this was actually understanding rongo. Now, rongo is traditional Maori medicine. So it involved combating an illness through tapu, natural law, mind, body, and spirit. So it includes the use of herbal medicines made from plants, physical methods such as massage, and spiritual healing techniques. Now, the 18th century scientist Joseph Banks, who travelled with Captain Cook to New Zealand in the 18th century, observed that Maori were in very good health. Now, a number of the Maori health issues are a result of European contact, so things like measles, mumps, rubella, colds, all came after that initial European contact. But at that initial European contact, Maori seemed in very good health, perhaps because of the effectiveness of their traditional forms of medicine. Like most medicine among indigenous groups, rongo was closely associated with the gods. So Maori believed that when you became sick, that was actually a result of you doing something bad, breaking some form of tapu and causing an evil spirit to come and inhibit your body. Other illnesses were also believed to have physical causes. A tauhanga would heal a patient who had any sickness, so the knowledge of tauhanga was passed down through successive generations. So if Maori had discovered a plant that was useful early on in their culture, tauhanga would have passed that on and would have spread throughout the country as more and more people would have learned about it. So the focus of this study is obviously about plants and Kawakawa. So an important part of rongo is the use of plants, and early accounts of rongo indicate that Kawakawa was used extensively in Maori culture and was used to enormous success. So various sources indicate that Kawakawa was used to treat stomach pains, cuts and wounds, toothaches, as a counter-irritant, rheumatic pain, serious bruises, chest complaints, and infected wounds. And if you're interested, you can go and read some of these books and you'll see that there are pages and pages dedicated to Kawakawa and all the various anecdotal stories of which it's been used to treat. Now, in their traditional culture, Maori prepared infusions of Kawakawa by boiling the leaves in water or heating the leaves and then applying that poultice to the skin. Kawakawa is also used today in similar ways, but it's also marketed in balms, insect treatments as an alternative form of treatment for many of the same ailments that Maori used it for. A number of the ailments that Maori used Kawakawa for can be linked back to inflammation. So an important part of my project was consultating with a number of people. So perhaps the most significant of these, who can't be here tonight, is Dr. Taylor, who mentored me with this project, and none of what I've achieved would have been possible without him. So he enabled me to gain the skills that enabled me to conduct the biological testing and point me along the project. But the understanding that he has helped me to gather enabled me to actually address the questions which I was looking at solving. Then, as part of gaining understanding of rongo, I spoke with Professor Mike Walker, Dr. Rebecca Fuller, Dr. Joe Torito, and Dr. Marilyn McPherson as to how they use Kawakawa and its position in rongo. Furthermore, I consulted the literature and people at Auckland University about extraction methodologies, and then kind of tried to fuse traditional extraction methods and kind of a more modern scientific approach together. So as I perhaps alluded to earlier, my original plan wanted to do antiviral and antibacterial testing, despite these having been studied previously. But the plan developed from antiviral testing to anti-inflammatory testing, because primarily antiviral testing is incredibly difficult. Like, if anti-inflammatory testing is hard, then antiviral testing is much harder. And given the time and my lack of skill in the first place, it was going to be unlikely that I was actually going to be able to conduct these tests successfully, and even if I did have any confidence in the end results that were produced. Furthermore, the anti-inflammatory properties of Kawakawa had never been investigated before. So there was this kind of enormous, for a high school student, niche in the literature which was available for me to kind of add something new that we hadn't known before. So that then led to this kind of fusion of maramatanga and science together to result in the kind of project that we have today. So the extraction methods were an important part of this project, and one which quite a lot of time went into thinking about. So initially 7 were developed and carried out. However, due to the constraints of time and basically the ability to want to do a large number of repeats, which was likely to be necessary, 2 were chosen. So the first that was chosen was an aqueous infusion methodology. this fused the kind of methods described by Maori and Ronga with knowledge from scientific studies on the extraction of biodiesels from plants. So in this method was analogous to making a tea. So fresh Kawakawa leaves were chopped up and added to boiling water, which was then left to cool down. So it replicated traditional Maori methods. So Maori traditionally added their leaves to water, and certainly in more recent times Maori have added leaves to hot water, and so this was replicated within a scientific context. The second method was a chlorophyll methanol water mixture, which the leaves were soaked in to extract, hopefully, some bioactive compounds. So this was a modern scientific approach. So when I communicated and talked with people at the University of Auckland about how they wanted to extract a plant and they didn't really know what they were looking for in it, then this was the kind of method that they would use. The use of organic solvents and with a range of polarities was like just the basic go-to, I want to extract something guide. So neither of the methods that we used were based solely on a previous methodology and combined factors from a number of previous studies. Significantly, no previous study had used an aqueous extraction method when testing the medicinal properties of Kawakawa before. My project then had a number of stages. The first was the previously discussed extraction, the second was the testing of cell viability, and then the third was the anti-inflammatory assays. So, cell viability is actually a really important part of doing any cell culture testing. So cell viability is the ability of a cell to withstand specific concentrations of a substance. So it could be measured by examining the effect of a substance on the cell's metabolic activity, or whether the substance is cytotoxic and causes the cell membrane to burst. So cell viability is really important because it's not possible to be confident in any other results that your study produces unless you're confident that the cells still function and are alive when you've added extract to them. This is because cells that are dead or cells with reduced metabolic activity will end up showing false results. So what you might see is a reduction in one of your inflammatory markers, not because there's anti-inflammatory activity, but just because cells are dying and so aren't producing any of the inflammatory marker. So 3 tests were used to test the cell viability: the MTT assay, the trypan blue assay, and flow cytometry. These were just variations along a similar theme, just to be confident that none of the cells functioning was being degraded. Then the next and perhaps most important stage of the project was anti-inflammatory testing. So the fundamental question that the project was looking to answer, its aim as such, was whether extracts of Kawakawa have anti-inflammatory activity. So inflammation is one of the body's first responses to injury or infection. So we've all cut our finger, and once the cut's kind of healed up, you've had that red stuff around it which kind of hurts when you touch it. That's inflammation. So acute inflammation can be caused by infections, be it viral, bacterial or parasitic, trauma, physical or chemical agents such as burn or frostbite, and foreign bodies such as splinters or dirt. The body's response to inflammation leads to the production of inflammatory markers such as nitric oxide, TNF-alpha, and interleukin-6, IL-6. So inflammatory cytokines such as TNF-alpha and IL-6 control the inflammatory process. They signal for cells to come to the area of inflammation and remove the debris, which actually enables you to heal. So in the lab, inflammation can be simulated by the addition of compounds derived from bacteria to the cells that cause them to think there's like an infection and produce these markers. A reduction in the presence of the 3 inflammatory markers, IL-6, nitric oxide or TNF-A, in the presence of the extract would indicate that that extract has anti-inflammatory activity. So previously validated methods were used to ensure that the results of the study were accurate. This ensured that it was possible to be confident in the results of your study, and there weren't any questions at the end of the study about, gosh, was the method that I was using actually going to get me the results that I was looking for? Was it going to actually realistically show the amount of marker being produced? And so if you hadn't done that, there would have been an enormous question mark, which meant your results wouldn't have meant that much at all. So an important part of being able to do this project was gaining the skills, the experience, and the ability to do cell culture testing in the lab by myself with like as little supervision as possible, were skills that I had to acquire, and an enormous amount of time was spent at the start of the project actually gathering those skills. And it wasn't till perhaps the last moments in the lab that we were actually getting repeatable results that were likely to at least provide some insight into the question that they were looking to answer. But also the skills needed to organise and conduct scientific research of this magnitude, scale and complexity were all ones that I had to establish. Sending out emails asking for help were all things that took time to work out how to do, and that kind of communication. So, now we move on to the analysis, which is very exciting for me. So, the first set of results we're looking at are the production of cytokines, TNFA and IL-6 in the chlorophyll methanol water. In the chlorophyll methanol water extract. So, with regards to TNFA production, there was the chlorophyll methanol water extract had no effect, either pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. But with regards to IL-6 production, as the red circles show, at concentrations greater than 250 micrograms per mil, the extract appeared to act as a pro-inflammatory agent, because as you can see, there's a lovely statistically significant increase above the control, the 0 microgram per mil sample. So that sample contained no Kawakawa extract and was just normal cell medium, so that's the baseline level that we were comparing it to. So at a concentration of 500 micrograms per mil, there was a 60% increase in IL-6 production, and then at 1,000 micrograms per mil, there was a 68% increase. So that shows that there's some pro-inflammatory activity, and we'll talk about why that's significant later on. So, then nitric oxide production, which is another inflammatory marker in the two different Kawakawa extracts. So in the in the chlorophyll methanol water extract, there was no effect on nitric oxide production. None of the changes compared to the control were statistically significant. However, in the aqueous extract, there was several statistically significant reductions. So at a concentration of 1,000 micrograms per mil, there was a 60% decrease in nitric oxide production, and then at 500 micrograms per mil, there was a 40% decrease in nitric oxide production. Oh yeah, the circles show that. So then TNFA. So TNFA is another inflammatory marker, and this looks at the results in the aqueous infusion extract. So at concentrations of 500 and 1,000 micrograms per mil, the production of TNFA was inhibited by the addition of the aqueous extract. So at 1,000 micrograms per mil, there was a 40% reduction, and then at 500 micrograms per mil, there was another 40% reduction. Both of those reductions were statistically significant. However, interestingly, at 15.6 micrograms per mil, there was a increase in TNFA production at a concentration of 15.6 micrograms per mil. Again, we'll talk about why there can be both pro-inflammatory activity and anti-inflammatory activity happening at the same time later on. So then, with regards to IL-6, another inflammatory marker in the aqueous extract. So at a concentration of 250 micrograms per mil, there was a 58.2% decrease. Then at 125 micrograms per mil, there was a 43% decrease in IL-6 production. So what these reductions suggest is that there is anti-inflammatory activity in the aqueous Kawakawa extract. So all three of the inflammatory markers measured showed at some concentration a statistically significant reduction when exposed to the aqueous Kawakawa extract, suggesting anti-inflammatory activity. So in all results, the standard error of the mean was calculated, as was the statistical significance. So this allowed to judge whether a reduction was actually like a real reduction or just a reduction based on chance within the standard kind of variation that you'd expect. Obviously, if I'd had more time to refine my skill and become more accurate, you would have seen smaller error bars and perhaps more statistically significant results. So, the extracts. Notably, at some concentrations of the assays, the extract demonstrated some pro-inflammatory activity. So, this reflects the crude nature of the extract. So in the same way that it's likely that the leaves contained cytotoxic compounds that would have affected the cells at really high concentrations, so for example 2,000 micrograms per mil, it's likely that the extract of the leaves contained both pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory compounds. So what does this mean? This means that at all concentrations, the results that we see are likely the result of the interaction between pro-inflammatory compounds and anti-inflammatory compounds, and the results that you end up seeing on the graphs and the numbers that are produced are simply the averaging or the net result of the effect of these two compounds. So at some concentrations, the interactions between these two types of compounds has changed or differs. Now the reason for this is that the extraction methods were broad, right? So if you knew that you were looking for like one specific type of compound, then you'd use an extraction method that specifically extracted this. Because I didn't know what kind of bioactive compound I was looking for, I had to extract as many as possible, which is why you're likely to get these two kind of responses happen. It's really significant that the anti-inflammatory activity occurs only in the aqueous extract, for several reasons. The first is that it perhaps explains why none of the previous studies have shown any activity, because they've used organic solvents in doing their extract, so something like methanol or ethanol, not water. And it could suggest that the aqueous extract contains a particularly bioactive compound, or has extracted a range of bioactive compounds from the leaf which exhibit anti-inflammatory activity at a number of concentrations. It would also suggest that the bioactive compounds responsible for the activity in Kawakawa are only soluble in water, are thermostable, so aren't affected by heat, but also perhaps need heat to be extracted from the leaves. So, as those of us who have done science, or not science even, might know, when you heat something, the reaction occurs faster. So if you're looking to make something happen faster, often you heat it, and it happens faster. So that's basically what heating would have done. It would have increased the ability of the compounds to move out of the leaves. So this is really important because it means that there appears to be a connection between the extraction method used and the result that you see. So this might explain why previous studies didn't see any activity. They weren't using the right kind of extraction method. And this in turn suggests that in the future you could go back and redo antiviral, antibacterial testing to see if, when you use an aqueous extract, if you actually do get activity. So that would add, again, to the literature base. So the uses of Kawakawa identified by Maori and Ronga are supported by the anti-inflammatory activity observed in this study through reduction in nitric oxide, TNFA and IL-6 reduction in the presence of the aqueous extract. So the aim of this project was achieved, and this project fills a very interesting niche in the literature. There's been no previous research into the anti-inflammatory properties of Kawakawa before, and perhaps even more significantly, no previous studies actually been able to explain why the traditional uses of Kawakawa and the actions of Kawakawa and Ronga can actually be explained. This study provides a mechanism to do that. So firstly, why is that? So anti-inflammatory activity could address a number of the symptoms that Maori use Kawakawa to address. So for example, something like toothache, the symptoms of that can be suppressed by an anti-inflammatory agent. If you hurt yourself whilst running or doing physical activity, in the same way that you might apply Voltaren Enema gel today, Maori might have applied Kawakawa. But also, when you get a viral or bacterial infection, this results in inflammation as well. So if you consumed when Maori consumed Kawakawa, what might have been happening is the anti-inflammatory activity of the Kawakawa leaves might have been suppressing the symptoms of this viral bacterial infection, which enabled you to either get on or feel better faster, despite your body continuing to fight the infection that you have. So this knowledge is extremely significant to Maori communities as it supports their cultural practice with scientific evidence for the first time. As with any good science, there are more unanswered questions now than when I began my study, and you could spend a long time investigating Kawakawa, I think. So in the future, the first step of future research would be to fractionate the aqueous extract down into more refined sections, and then run the anti-inflammatory activities again to see if that extract or if that activity was still present in all of the fractions or just some of the fractions. And then having done that, you could use mass spectrometry, so those who've taken level 3 chemistry and done the internal GES will know what mass spectrometry is, but basically it enables you to identify what the compounds in the extract are. So that would be important in seeing if it's a new bioactive compound that acts in Kawakawa, if it's bioactive compounds that we already know about acting, or if it's a number of bioactive compounds perhaps acting together to get the activity. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the antiviral and antibacterial activity could be tested again. But I think Kawakawa is a really exciting thing to research. I think there's a lot of opportunity to continue to research it in the future. So does anyone have any questions? I'm welcome to take them now. We can speak to me after. Mr. Ropati.
Chris, did Maori digest Kawakawa?
Yeah, so in a number of instances they either made a tea and then drank that extract, or they applied hot leaves to their skin. Yes?
Are you aware that the Maori and Polynesians had shark liver oil which was equally good as an antibacterial stat and anti-inflammatory? Only obtained from the female sharks when they're coming in this time of the year to give birth to pups. And New Zealand shark liver oils were the highest potency of all fish oils. And multinational pharmaceuticals thought this is a great idea. This is pre-war. They put the shark oil with a petroleum base. Wasn't accepted, it smelt. They put it into an emulsion, still smelt. And then synthetic vitamin A came along and it doesn't work. It's a synergistic effect of the vitamin A with more than 4 or 5 compounds in the shark liver oil that gives it the properties you're looking at in Kawakawa leaves.
Yeah, so like indigenous cultures have used a number of different things to kind of treat some of the obstacles that they've faced. And even today in modern medicine, a vast number of the drugs that we use, 25% to be precise, are derived from compounds based in plants. So most commonly, the one we're most familiar with is aspirin. So aspirin wasn't just made up by some chemist somewhere. Aspirin is derived from salicylic acid, which is present in willow tree bark. So it's not particularly surprising that in animals you can see bioactive compounds, or that in plants you can see bioactive compounds, all of which have some effect. The question then becomes which ones are most accessible, which ones are the most effective, and then the kind of thing that you're talking to at the end of your question is like commercialization. So again, like often in plant and animal systems, there are a number of different things that work together to help treat whatever the action is seen. So that can often make it quite difficult to isolate those compounds and commercialize them. So in Kawakawa, it might be a number of compounds that act together. It might just be one. It's very difficult to tell, or it's impossible to tell, without any further research. But also on that note of commercialization, I think there are important cultural sensitivities which one must consider when doing this kind of thing. So it's important to remember, one, that Maori consider rongo to be a holistic medicine. So they think it's about not only plants, but spiritual and massaging all together, working as one, not just isolating one on its own and using that. Secondly, Maori think it's really important not to actually commercialise the knowledge that it's accessible to everyone. And so I think, especially considering Y262, which is in front of the Waitangi Tribunal, commercialisation is a path that one would have to tread gently along and follow all the necessary and correct procedure. Any other questions? Oh, many questions. This is good.
Chris, do you have any idea what the mechanism of action the compounds might be doing to demonstrate the anti-inflammatory properties?
So with regards to nitric oxide, they could either be interfering with the receptors that produce nitric oxide, so it's just not produced. They could be interfering with the processes that make nitric oxide, same with each of the cytokines. And they could also be interfering with how the nitric oxide and IL-6 and TNFA attaches to cells or interacts with cells. and tells them to produce or act inflamed or go to the area. So there's a number of mechanisms, but again, the study wasn't really looking at those kind of mechanisms, and that would be an exciting area of future research, I think, to see if it's a novel way or if it's a way we already know about, or just to know would be interesting. Full stop. Yes.
How do you measure the individual concentrations, the 125, 250, 500? How did you?
Yeah, so when we made the extract, we freeze-dried it down so that we had like a zero concentration to start from. That freeze-dried extract was then added to water at a concentration of 5 milligrams of freeze-dried extract per mil, which is far higher than you'd ever add anything to cell culture, as it would probably, well, as it would be cytotoxic. Then that was just diluted down by serial dilutions in cell medium to get the desired concentration. So serial dilutions, yeah. Anyone else, or yes, Mr. Morrison?
The Kawakawa plant.
Yes.
Has that always been present here, or was it?
No, it's always been present in New Zealand, and its relatives are also endemic to a number of other areas and sea activities. So, for example, in Fiji, Fijian kava is in the same way that Maori thought that Kawakawa has action. Fijians think that Fijian kava has activity. So again, lots of areas researched, and lots of new opportunities that you could think about researching, following on from this research and seeing kind of the activity that we've seen in my study.
And following that, is there evidence that it was actually cultivated, or in large amounts?
Typically not. Maori would have just, traditionally Maori would have gone into the bush in the early morning, picked the leaves from the east side that had been chewed by the larvae of the moth, and done a karakia as thanks to their gods for letting them have these leaves and for helping them treat the ailments that they face.
Chris, is there a scientific term for the anti-inflammatory extract? Or are you going to name one?
Well, the extract method is like an aqueous infusion, and that's how you describe the extraction method.
But is there an anti-inflammatory component from the Kawakawa leaf? Would that have
yes, there might be one, or there might be many. So if you did mass spectrometry, you could see if that's a compound that we already know about, or if it's something new that we don't know about. And if it's something new, then you'd name it, and it would have some scientific IUPAC name. Yeah. And so if there's no other questions, you're welcome to ask me later. There are a large number of people that I need to thank. Some of them are here, some of them are not here, but I simply wouldn't have been able to do this project without their support. So on the scientific front, Dr. Taylor and Jenny and Carol in his lab provided an enormous amount of support in helping me kind of conquer the biological assay challenges and mountains that needed to be conquered, and I'm incredibly appreciative because they were so patient. I hadn't used a pipette before. I didn't know what serial dilutions are, so there was a range of probably silly or first year questions that they answered always so patiently, and David Greenwood was enormously helpful with the extraction methods. The support of Ngāpai o Te Maramatanga, not only as a funder, but also as someone who's been willing to engage with me about Kawakawa's significance in Rongoa, has been incredible, and their willingness to do this at the highest level. So Daniel Hikaroa Dr. Daniel Hikaroa and Daniel Patrick, their chief scientist and executive director respectively, have been very supportive, as have a number of other people within the organisation. And then on a technical front, Jackie Bay, I wouldn't have been able to get the project off the ground in all likelihood without her support.